Agatha Christie's novel, Murder in Three Acts, that's the American title, was called Three Act Tragedy in England when it was originally published in the mid to late 30s. The novel is divided into three parts, and they're called three acts. So, Act 1 is called Suspicion, and is about maybe the first fourth of the book. The second act, which takes up the second part of the first half of the novel, is called Certainty, and the third act, which is the whole second half of the novel, is called Discovery. The whole thing is laid out like a stage play. You've got these acts, and then you're even given some theatrical credits. You have directed by, assistant directors, clothes by, and illumination by, and these are all the characters that are going to come into play. All are these parts, and they make much more sense after the denouement of the story. I actually find this novel remarkably undramatic, given its theatrical kind of motif or setup. It's a very probably a pretty dialogue-heavy novel, but and maybe that was part of her idea, almost as if it's a stage play, and these are lines being read back and forth. There's certainly that element. The most dramatic part, surprisingly, comes up at the denouement with Poirot's solution. And I say surprisingly because Poirot, for the whole play, has been dealing with these actors and playwrights and even a kind of a society person who's a theater goer, and he accuses them of having an overly theatrical response to what's being thrown at them, and that's affecting their ability to figure out the problems. And so he says that Sir Charles Cartwright, who is a main figure in this and a retired actor, that he always has a flair for the theatrical, for the romantic, and so he's going to shape the events around him in that idea and draw conclusions that are more of the dramatic. Then we have Mr. Satterthwaite, who you'll remember was the main character in the Harley Quinn stories, the mysterious Mr. Quinn. He makes an appearance here. We have a meeting of two worlds, and he's kind of described as more of a theater goer. He sees them under this kind of film of atmosphere. He creates the atmosphere, or he lets the atmosphere be created around him and filters everything through that. So while he has all of the information he needs, his objectivity is somewhat skewed. Now, Poirot, he says that he is the best person to solve this, of course, because he's a very pompous character, but also because he feels that he does not bring any of these theatrical trappings to his approach. His approach is straightforward. Let's think. The other characters are more active. We need to do something. We need to talk to people. But he just wants to sit and think. And he reminds them over and over that it's this thinking, that it's this just looking at the bald facts without any sort of atmosphere, any kind of romantic notions are what's going to solve this case. And of course, it is what solves the case. But as I mentioned, the most dramatic part of the whole novel is Poirot's explanation of what happened. Of course, it's partly because we've been dying to know the whole novel what the solution is. But also, Poirot does have a flair for the dramatic in the way that he describes events. The complication for Poirot in solving this is that there seems to be a lack of motive in the first murder. There are three murders, one in each act, and so we've got three poison deaths, and but there are plenty of reasons why someone might want to kill the doctor in the second act, but absolutely no motive for killing the minister in the first act. So we don't know why. Poirot doesn't have context. And again, that's where context plays an important part. None of these facts make any sense until we have a backstory, until we understand. So if we follow Christie's motif of the theater for this novel, and even look at Poirot's role in that at the beginning, where it notes illumination by Hercule Poirot. In theater terms, that would be, he'd be the light guy, the light designer. And in terms of detection, of course, he's throwing light on the situation, and light could be kind of a symbol of truth. He's casting light on it so we can see the whole picture. We aren't left in the the dark, like the audience, like Mr. Satterthwaite, who can just observe in this kind of passive audience-like way. Now, with the presence of two larger Christie characters whose worlds kind of collide in this novel, we did get a couple of different viewpoints of how to approach solving these problems or the crime. Poirot, of course, we know, looks at the facts. He shines a light on them. He doesn't concern himself with the theatricality of it. With Satterthwaite, it's a little bit different. He looks more at the psychology. And while he's still affected by atmosphere, we get a couple of good insights into his ideas about psychology. Mr. Satterthwaite has a very interesting conversation with one of the other characters in the novel, and they're talking about criminals. And Mr. Satterthwaite says, "It's a very common phenomenon. If ever I see anyone who appears to only think of himself and boasts unceasingly, I always know that there's a secret sense of inferiority somewhere. It seems very odd. An inferiority complex is a very peculiar thing. Crippen, for instance, undoubtedly suffered from it. It's at the back of a lot of crimes, the desire to assert one's personality. It seems very strange to me," murmured Lady Mary. And so we have here this idea that, or a motive for crime, asserting one's personality, which I think is very interesting in the context of Christie, where she's exploring identity, her own identity through her characters, and the identity of the characters that she creates. So here we've got an idea that that murder is a form, basically, of self-expression and a form of identity, at least in this novel. Later, when Mr. Satterthwaite is talking to Lady Mary again, in the same conversation, in fact, another bit of information comes out, this time from Lady Mary herself. She says, "Some books that I've read these last few years have brought a lot of comfort to me, books on psychology. It seems to show that in many ways people can't help themselves, a kind of kink. Sometimes in the most carefully brought up families you get it. As a boy, Ronald, who is her husband, her dead husband in the story, stole money at school, money that he didn't need. I can feel now that he couldn't help himself. He was born with a kink." Very gently and with a small handkerchief, Lady Mary wiped her eyes. "It wasn't what I was brought up to believe," she said apologetically. "I was taught that everyone knew the difference between right and wrong, but somehow I don't always think that's so." "The human mind is a great mystery," said Mr. Satterthwaite gently. "And as yet, we are only just groping our way to understanding." So here, again, this happens to be Satterthwaite's method of just really taking in the atmosphere, listening to people, hearing what they have to say, and we get a very insightful bit of information about human psychology. Christie is often accused of creating cardboard or stock characters that are always types. You've got the colonel, you've got the spinster, you've got the penniless actor and the young ingenue, and they sometimes are accused of behaving according to type, or Christie's accused of writing them according to type. Really, I think it's less to do with a lack of imagination and more to do with the fact that she really believes that people behave in patterns. It's a very, I think that's kind of her psychological approach to humanity, that people, certain types of people in given circumstances basically behave in a particular way. She certainly outlines that with characters like Poirot, like Harley Quinn and Mr. Satterthwaite, and also like Parker Pyne. They look at everything in these patterns and how people behave. Same even with Miss Marple, who looks at the patterns of human nature and applies them to larger areas. So I think that this is what's really going on. This novel plods a bit, and I found it too dialogue heavy, but I did really enjoy the second half of it much more than the first half. The love interest between Sir Charles and Egg is not very interesting. Egg is not that interesting of a character to me, in fact. I give it a 3.75 out of 5. It's not Poirot's best. Nevertheless, his solution to the problem is very interesting.